Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
WESN.
It is with sadness, of course, that while many of you may already know, we here on Talking Point on WSN must acknowledge the passing of another one of our, essentially, for all intents and purposes, living institutions. Roy Cape, a musician of, I guess you could say, great renown. Even if you knew nothing of the man, I hazard, I guess you, at least those of a certain generation and older, would have heard his band's name, the Roy Cape All-Stars. And with just a little bit of digging, you would easily find how deep his influence in our local music scene has been. And of course, unfortunately, we must now say has been. I've said this before on this and other shows on WSN. I hope that we cherish our greats while they're alive. I lamented the fact that it seems as though, and this is not something unique to TNT, this is human nature. While they are in the twilight years, those who laid the foundation, we seemingly, it's not that we push them to the side, it's just that life moves on and we may not think about them as much as we used to until they pass, and then, well, it's a phenomenon even seen amongst the families of some people, everyday citizens who wonder, why is it that you make so much effort to remember me after I've gone as opposed to be with me when I'm still alive? And I feared to some degree we don't appreciate our heroes until they're gone. But when they're gone, they're no longer wrong to impart the wisdom that they've accumulated. In his case, 50 years as a musician. Now, to be fair, he received the Hummingbird Medal 20 years ago. He got recognition. He got an honorary degree from UE 13 years ago. Did we acknowledge him enough or not? I can't say. I'm not that deep in that specific scene in arts and culture in the country. But at the end of the day, and I guess this is something that we are all reminded of, even if we haven't necessarily thought it out. And I find a similarity as we said goodbye to the last of a generation in my family, the last of 7, my grandmother's last surviving sibling. Without having to necessarily say it, I think many of us had the same thought. A chapter is closed on our family now. And to some extent, the musicians of a certain generation, we must unfortunately watch as we lose them one by one until perhaps a chapter in our culture is closed. And his peers, of course, will mourn his loss as we will continue to mourn our heroes, our greats that we've lost. So I say all that to say, regardless of whether we did right by our heroes or not, we should do our best to remember them and to engage with those who are still alive so that their experiences will remain available to us. For those that are not recorded, hopefully they will be recorded. Not only is the experiences of those who paved the way valuable learning tools, but also they essentially tell the story of the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the great storytellers, through his instrument, we now say rest in peace and offer condolences to his family. Sean Michael Small here, this is Talking Point on WESN. Of course, I don't necessarily want to, it's difficult to speak on such a topic and then have to switch gears, because of course on this show we do have to deal with the issues at hand, or I try to. So with that said, taking the switching gears, let's transition with a minor positive story first. There's a report, two residents of Sealot apparently decided to intervene when there was a traffic accident on the highway. They jumped into action to try to pull a man out of a burning vehicle, despite the fact that other onlookers were warning them that it could have exploded at any moment. I think you could see the pictures and the names in the papers. Mr. Deshaun Hamilton and Terrence David. At an age in 2024 when people tend to not to want to be involved for various reasons. Things are not so bad here in Trinidad, but I could say, like in China, people don't want to be involved because it could be a scam. In Trinidad, we don't want to be involved because we don't want any of the consequences that might just be a part of it, including, as some of those onlookers say, it's dangerous. And one could argue, yes, if it is dangerous, do you risk the lives of others and potentially lose more people? But these two men made a decision, and that potentially was the difference. They prevented someone from burning in a flaming car wreck. And hopefully that example, that spirit of willingness, because one would have expected the negative stereotype and the narrative to be the complete opposite. I'm sure you've heard these stories. If someone has a traffic accident at maybe not this community, but others along the highway, what would happen? You're not going to get help, you're going to get picked clean, right? Let's not sweat the details of the day. They helped a man, they provided an example. Hopefully some young people will see this and maybe rethink their perspectives if their perspectives were leading them down a different path. or hopefully, if it wasn't, it would help cement values and principles that might have been imparted on them, but now they could see an example of actions that we would hope all of us would be willing to do, because if we were the ones trapped, unable to get out of a burning car, we would want onlookers to rush to help us too. The human spirit is a very complicated thing. There's a lot of ugliness to it. We're not immune from that. We're only human after all. But there's a lot of great things too. And we have that as well, despite all the negativity in the news, because we are also human, like any and everybody else. Now, switching gears again, before we get into the main topics, I just wanted to highlight something that I found very interesting. From the very beginning with Paria, it seemed as though people wanted to have a very singular perspective, limited perspective, because I made comments with regards to my opinion on how I saw the situation. And how I saw the situation ended up being generally in line with how the Commission of Inquiry found the situation. Whereas I had taken serious issue with the fact that, based on reports and accounts, which at the very least the Commission of Inquiry accepts that testimony, there was negligence with regards to rescue efforts, a lack of attempt, and a lack of permission to allow LMCS to attempt a rescue, which I felt was wrong, but to what degree they will be culpable for that still is yet to be determined. But a viewer actually did reach out to me and try to convince me that no, the real culprit is LMCS because they did not meet the standards to do the work, the safety standards, so they should be responsible. I can't remember if they said OSHA or not, but something similar to those lines, on those principles. And while I understood what he was saying, based on my limited knowledge of business law, I kind of knew that to some degree Paria did still have a duty of care, still had a responsibility over the situation. But then it came out from the Commission of Inquiry that it wasn't just LMCS that potentially was culpable with allowing a job to be undertaken by contractors who may or may not, or by divers who may or may not have been qualified for that specific work based on international standards. And the safety protocols that should have been in place may or may not, doesn't seem to be fully in place. LMCS approved it on their end. They got the divers, they sent them down there. Paria approved it on their end. They agreed to give the work to LMCS. They signed off on the various workflows and processes and paperwork and what have you. But there seems to be this thing where you want one person to be guilty because of one reason, when the Commission of Inquiry basically pointed out to us that, well, two things can be true at the same time because they occur at different points in the timeline, at different points in the situation. There potentially were breaches in OSHA that needs to be addressed, and both Paria and LMCS needs to answer to that. Then there is the lack of a rescue attempt. Paria needs to answer to that. Right now, it's being played out in the news where LMCS is trying to say it's Paria's fault, which in my mind is somewhat similar to what that one viewer wanting to just say, well, it's just this reason alone is the cause. But in many cases, industrial accidents or aviation accidents, anything to do with complex scenarios, heavy machinery, safety protocols, potentially being breached, etc., etc. Often or not, it's not just one singular thing that fails and causes disaster. Sometimes it is. What tends to happen is a couple of little things contribute And you could debate to what degree one contributed more than the other. Yes, I get it. Ali Jr. was one of the deceased. Ali Sr. lost his own son. Is that punishment enough? Technically, depending, no. It needs to go through the process. Now, with regards to paying out to the families, it seems as though at least one of the lawyers is not going to necessarily let LMCS off the hook. And nor should they. Responsibility is not a tool of convenience when we feel like it or not. It has to be based on principles of what were you responsible for and did you meet that responsibility? And that's a harsh truth of this situation where it will be very tempted to just point the fingers only at Paria. And in one part of it you could do that, but not in its entirety. All right. Let's close the soliloquy there. We'll transition to the other monologue, but we'll take a break. When we come back, then we'll go to the daily review. Stay tuned to Talking About WSN. We'll be right back after this. Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movie Town, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Wrapping up the week here, there are some stories that I've been trying to get to all week and have not been able to, and for that I apologize. They might seem late, but I still want to touch on them before the week closes. Can't bring them up next week. That'll just be impractical. So today it'll be more like a weekly or end of week review. But with that said, let's kick off today's daily review. And of course, it's an ongoing question whenever we have rains, that, especially when they lead to flooding, but any heavy rain. Where have the reservoirs reached? And The answer still, last word we got was none of them are high enough yet. Hillsborough, Tobago looks a lot better than the others. Probably WASA officials would have preferred for it to be higher still, but it's not necessarily looking as bad as it is with Arena Reservoir, Hollis, and Navette. Hollis and Arena look like it's a little less than half of where it should be. Now, to some degree, we do have to ask the questions, you know, is it that we haven't seen enough rain? And then the flip side of that is, well, maybe, you know, we're kind of grateful that we haven't had too much heavy rains, because when we have heavy rains, somewhere floods. It's not a matter of if somewhere floods. It's what part of the country, when we have heavy rains, is going to flood. That's what it seems like for the last couple of years. I'll be honest, this is very unscientific of me. I have not gone and researched to find out what the actual situation is. Just my impression of this year so far is that I think we have had less flooding than normal, potentially because we have had less rain while the wet season is going on than normal. Now we have if we're lucky, 5 months of the wet season left, because it could end anywhere from December to January. And we need, ironically, we have to hope for more rain, but then what does that mean for the property and livelihood or life of some of our citizens who may have to experience some unfortunate tragedy, because not all floods are created equal. What happens when we get one of those rare situations where the waters are over the car door, potentially over vehicles, flooding out at waist level or higher, flooding out people's homes, destroying their appliances and their furniture, isolating people, putting them at risk, those who have medical conditions, those who may be trapped in their home, whose food, because of the flood water, might be essentially inedible, and who may not have any other access to clean drinking water while the emergency is going on. Now, one of the things that kind of puts the whole situation into perspective is what's going on with the nation's capital and flooding. 2 former mayors have weighed in on this. Of course, one former mayor who is quite active in his advocacy for the city of Port of Spain, he said that there have been many plans, Louis Lee saying, there have been many plans to deal with flash flooding, but they have never been implemented. People have the ideas. They have never been implemented. Now, in more recent times, my assumption would be because there is no money allocated for that. And I would hazard, I guess, during his time, that also could be the case too. But what about before? At some point when the country was rolling in money, did anybody not think, our drainage situation in the capital might be getting worse and worse? Now, to be fair, maybe it wasn't quite as bad as yet. But we've reached the point now where it did not take a lot of rain. The last time I drove down Ryston Road, Port of Spain was flooded. The rain, maybe it was raining for 20 minutes. I doubt it was raining for an hour. It could have been less than 20 minutes. Former Mayor Joel Martinez, he did bring up the point. Lack of funding was the main reason why several projects to deal with flooding were not executed. Not even attempted, not even halfway attempted. Cleaning of the drains around the city, they say, is a short-term solution to the problem. Right? part of the issue is that some of the cases, some of these drains, there's been a buildup of debris and it's been concretized, and in many instances it might be impractical to try to clean them out. I don't know to what degree it would be impossible. If it was possible, how expensive that would be. Now, there was an idea of having a detention pond at South Key, but something like that, this is what Mr. Lee Singh has revealed, that was being worked on with then Minister of Works Jack Warner. I would like to point out the fact that we have a PNM mayor trying to work with a People's Partnership minister, because the work needs to get done. And I would argue that a detention pond, something along those lines, canals, not just for Port of Spain, but throughout the country where we see flooding within the last couple of years. And I'm pretty sure modern science is more than advanced enough. We could get people to survey our landscape to say, well, here is where might flood depending on the rain, etc., 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 and predict where are our areas that are most vulnerable, maybe moderately vulnerable, maybe slightly vulnerable, but at the end of the day, we should have something in place just in case, right? And again, I ask this, to what extent now we flood out, but yet we're short of water? Couldn't flood water be channeled into catchments that could then turn into reservoirs depending on how we implement it? So the fact that this situation in Port of Spain is just, it's solvable, but it seems as though nobody wants to solve it, and we have to ask why. Because the other thing is, it's not that Port of Spain is a sacred cow that the whole country needs to protect or do special things for. But just given the sheer amount of people that travel west and north to then turn left to go west, to go into Port of Spain for work, the amount of the country that converges on Port of Spain on a daily basis, I think the responsible thing would be to ensure that we don't have emergency situations or the risk of emergency situations to be so casually available. Because all those people go into Port of Spain and then they have to leave. If they get trapped in there now, what's going to happen? That's just but one question that implies great complications and difficulty when something unexpected occurs, of which Mother Nature tends to like to do to us, because that's the whole point of nature. Nature is not a mathematical equation in that regard. All right. Let's move on quick to some of the other stories. Of course, there was reporting of, I believe, it is the findings of Mala Dukaran. We haven't touched on that in talking about yet, but she did say, it was reported in the media, because she had she set this out in the public sphere, that there's, I believe it was 25 billion in Forex lost over time. Now, the Deputy Governor, Dr. Terence Farrell, he's saying that it's not that the money was lost, it's just that the removal of exchange controls when the dollar was floated has made it a challenge to find out exactly where the foreign exchange goes. And I'm saying, well, if you don't know where it goes, that sounds like you lost it. And here it lies, essentially, I think, it's not a debate on procedure, it's a debate on semantics and definitions. What do we mean by lost? Because if you can't trace it, it's lost. You don't know where it is, it's lost. Please find it for me if you can't, it's lost. But when it was initially said that the money was lost, I think the idea was that, to some extent, it wasn't just that we could not account for it, but it was within the system in a normal way, but rather it leaked out. It went to parts unknown that it should not have gone to. It may have been siphoned off. Who knows? A whole host of negative implications came from that statement, and I do believe that Dr. Farrell is trying to say that's not necessarily the case. Rather, it's just that it's within the system, we can't account for it. The financial flows could be identified, but the purpose would not be apparent. Well, I don't know if it's that simple. I don't know if that accounts for what Marla Dukaran observed and believes to be the case. That you could track the flows, but you just, no. From what I understand, it sounds to her that when you go through the accounting, to borrow a phrase from the current AG, the Forex, some of it, or 2 billion a year or 2 billion here and there, dissipates to the degree that it should leave us uncomfortable. I would challenge Dr. Farrell, as much as my challenge is worth less than the paper that it's printed on. Newsflash, it's not printed, there is no paper, therefore it's worth nothing. But with that said, come a little bit better than this. Because 25 billion US, or it could be 25 billion TT in Forex. This is not a small figure of leakage or loss. I think we need more than just saying, everything is fine. Is it? Because to some degree, the issues of Forex and the black market and its existence are very important right now to the day-to-day survival of the country. I would hazard, I guess, we would appreciate a little bit more than, well, we can't track it, but it's not lost. All right, moving on. This came up. I'll just be quick about it. Gavin Hira, security analyst and consultant, he has brought up I guess you could say, an interesting question that I don't know if TNT is ready to face. When will we be ready for immigrants or the children of immigrants to join the TTPS? Because one priest, and I don't believe this is the first time this concept has been floated, but one priest has pointed out, allow Venezuelan women to join the police force. The idea, the genesis of the idea I understand. You want to police these immigrants, you need to have some of the police to be of them, to understand them, to better communicate and relate to them. I get it. The issue is, I don't know how many immigrants join police services, if that makes sense. We're not talking first generation. We're talking the people that actually now came over a year or two ago, a month or two ago, or a week or two ago. To what extent is it practical to even consider them being recruited into the TTPS? And make no mistake about it. Depending on migration levels, if we continue to have a large population of Venezuelan migrants legally, they have to be legal. Illegal immigrants cannot join bodies of the states. One would hope. But legally, they could join. What will happen is the generations that come after. All right. It's going to happen as long as they're there and they're willing. But therein lies the other issue, and one might argue even the bigger issue. To what extent is TNT ready for a non-Afro-Trinbagonian, a non-Indian Trinbagonian to be a police officer? We're not necessarily ready for them to be prime minister. We haven't necessarily had to deal with other racial dynamics in our policing. But we already have messy racial dynamics in our politics, and there are those that want to try to make our racial dynamics in our policing messier. Because of our demographics, we've generally avoided that for the most part avoided what we see abroad, but now this brings a new element. Migrants, traditionally, by many societies, tend to be viewed to some extent as outsiders, which is why, again, it's easier for their children, their children's children, to further integrate into those aspects of society, to join things like the police force. But to what extent will we be ready to accept it? You see, we could speak about an ideal world, but let's be real. Trinidad and Tobago is not a real place, much less is it an ideal world. We have a lot of self-inflicted wounds that we have to treat with. Are we mature and ready enough to add more complexities to the dynamics of our situation? I don't know that we are. All right. I will save the next story. Actually, we could save it for next week. I want to take a break. When we come back, there was a media briefing. I have one observation I would like to make, and maybe we could discuss it later on in the program, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, but we'll have to wait on that. Let's take a break, and we will take a peek at a little bit of the media briefing yesterday. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSN. We'll be right back after this.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
let's go to the last part.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
The messaging around our crime situation is one that I have taken umbrage with. And sometimes I do wonder if continuing along my line of discussion, my position gets redundant. But at the same time, since nothing has changed, I can't change what I'm saying just for the sake of variety. This is not a romantic comedy, a soap opera. This is not entertainment. This is not fiction. This is reality. So I appreciate that the TTPS is doing its work, but I do wonder if to some degree, do they fully understand all aspects, no matter how small, of the job that they are supposed to be doing. Now, when COVID happened, I appreciated the Ministry of Health's press conferences, but But I always was frustrated because I think what we got was what they thought we wanted, but oftentimes the information provided did have certain questions. I don't think that those questions were deliberate. They wanted to withhold information from us. No, I think it was just that the press conferences were long and they tried to give us what they thought was the most important information. And it did not always clarify certain things with regards to how the situation was evolving, improving, not improving, etc. And I do wonder if some of it, with regards to the TPS and their communication, is along those lines. Because doctors are not professional communicators. And police officers are technically also not professional communicators, although one could argue if you're senior officials in the Ministry of Health or executive leadership of the TTPS, part of your job description is to be able to do that job better, to do that job well enough. Are they doing it well enough? Well, can't show you the whole press briefing, which was pretty short, all things considered. I think the presentation initially was 10 minutes. The whole thing was less than half an hour. Still can't show you the initial presentation, but we do have a small clip of 2 parts I'd like to highlight. So, without further ado, it's time to cue this.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me also
probably
put in perspective our crime situation as we really look at the situation before us. When we look at the data, it is clear that we've seen at least 3 divisions where we've seen an increase in murders. When we look at the Port of Spain division, we have compiled, even as we look back within a 5-year period, we've seen that Port of Spain division would have more or less had an increase in terms of their murders, and the only year that they probably had an increase that, or a number that is higher, was in 2019, where they had 80. At this time, they have 70 at this time. We also saw an increase in terms of Tobago, where presently there's 21 murders, and again, it has been the highest that we've seen in Tobago within the last 5 years. And last but not least, Eastern Division, where in 2023 they had 33 and 2022 43, but this year they had 40. So we recognize all other divisions, which is the last 7 divisions, has shown the lowest possible numbers throughout the last 5 years. So when we put that within its own perspective, we are seeing that at least 7 of our divisions, the officers and the divisional officers are really working to ensure that level of safety and stability within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and their station districts. And for this, we want to really commend the officers and also the divisional officers and their regional ACPs for doing a tremendous job in relation to that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are certainly not at ease at all, because we recognize that the crime situation demands decisive action by the police. We want to assure you that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service stands ready to deal with any situation. This is not a situation where crime is out of control. We are totally in control of the crime situation. We look at our statistics, and it is clear that we have right now a minus 16% in terms of our serious crime. There are 14 different areas in that serious crime, and of the 14 areas, only 3 areas there is an increase. So certainly the police, we are working, we will continue to work, and we will continue to make that impact in terms of ensuring safety and security. Even though we have taken a hit with the homicide, we know that as we continue, we are going to see a positive end.
Things are not out of control, folks. Things are not out of control. They have a handle on it. Because 7 out of the 10 divisions have seen a reduction in murders. And that is due to the work of those divisions. The problem is, if I were to clap my hands 3 times, hop on one leg, spin around twice, and then shout Geronimo, and it was to rain, does it mean that what I just did was a rain dance, or was it a coincidence? Now, obviously, you would then ask me, well, explain to me how the song and dance that you did caused it to rain. And I would be unable to, and then you will rightfully conclude that I have as much power to cause the rain to happen as, pigs could fly and dogs and cats could speak English. 7 out of 10 divisions have less murders than before, but 3 divisions, the murder rate has climbed. And our total murder rate is not necessarily reduced in any significant way. We're more or less par for the course of a high figure in the high 500s to low 600s. It just all depends for the next less than 4 months, but it's most of September is left to go to see where we end up this year. It's almost like a game. We want to find out the outcome, right? Of the TV series, so we have to watch all the episodes until the end. The thing is, why does that supposed to make us feel better? Because I would have appreciated, and maybe a reporter asked this, I tried to see if this was asked. I didn't have the time to do so. I apologize if it was. That is my fault. I'm not saying that it's an excuse I didn't have the time. It was my fault to not find it. But what is the further explanation as to how exactly the other divisions were able to reduce murders, that the fact that murders being reported or being committed in those divisions being less is due to police work? Where's the explanation for that? Because to some extent, it kind of doesn't make sense. The other divisions' police officers are magically just better equipped than the police officers in, say, Tobago. They have a special source that they're not sharing with the 3 divisions that are seeing the bulk of the murders. What is it about the policing that has allowed these results? Can you explain that? Do you even have a theory, or is it an assumption? Is it merely a correlation? Correlation is not causation. If I do a rain dance and it just happens to rain, that's a correlation. That doesn't mean my little puppy show actually caused the rain. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I am saying if you want me to buy what you're selling, you need to give me a little bit more details than, well, we did good work. So how magically, the same TTPS, we're not talking about the United States of America and we're comparing the police service of the LAPD on the West Coast versus the NYPD on the East Coast, and there are, hundreds of miles in between. This is Trinidad and Tobago. With the exception of, obviously, Tobago and the divisions, the East, the South. There's 7 divisions, right? What's so unfortunate about the 3 that have the high murder rates? What's so different about what the officers are doing? Or could it just be that this year, that's where the criminals found their targets? In part because Tobago traditionally is not a crime hotspot, so it may have been viewed as safe. So people that may or may not be engaged in a life of crime, who may or may not be targets of rival criminals, might think, oh, but I could go to Tobago and I should be safe, because traditionally I would have been safe. But not this year. Because some of the people killed in Tobago are not just Tobagonians, some of them are Trinidadians. They went after them over there. What does that have to do with policing? Is this the level of statistical analysis that we're going to get? Again, maybe they do have a better explanation somewhere else in press conference, or they just didn't give it to us. I don't know why. But if you're trying to tell us that things are not out of control and that in most cases murder is down because of our good work, what work is that exactly? Please explain. Because again, ironically speaking, this is why, as much as I do not necessarily think that a university degree should be necessary, in many cases it will benefit people. Because ironically speaking, in many instances in life, the basic standards to write an academic paper will work very well for you, whether you're in the media as a journalist, whether you're in business, whether you're a member of a public institution in law enforcement, and you have to craft a position, craft a public relations message. Because academic standards, ironically, are generally in line in many ways with standards for journalism, are generally in line in many ways for standards of ethical public relations. Also, when you write an academic paper, not everything is just based on facts alone. You will have the facts that you have accumulated, you will have the justification of why those facts are relevant, and then you will have a section where you will potentially present theories and hypotheses to explain certain things that might not have readily apparent explanations, hence the value of your work. You're not just reporting on something. If you're in the hard sciences and you have a new discovery, then yes, you are reporting on that. That's a whole different thing. But if you're an academic in the field of economics, in the field of social psychology, etc., etc., you're examining something and you're providing analysis. And the analysis, of course, will include some amount of hypothesis based on analysis of the factual data presented, as well as reasonable assumptions that you might outline. Because you are trying to convince someone by building a strong argument, by building a strong case. You are including various things to help make your explanation stronger and therefore more easily accepted. And when you're trying to convince the public of something, you tend to have to do many of the same steps because on a practical level, it's very similar on a very basic level. You provide us with factual information. You provide us with reasonable assumptions. You justify that. You justify why the information is pertinent. And then you give us reasonable theories and hypotheses. And you give us justification of why you think those theories and hypotheses are reasonable. And then you give us your conclusion. But what we got here was the basic, bare bones initial facts and a conclusion, and nothing to support why it is what you say it is. And if you put something like that in an academic paper, you probably would fail. You probably wouldn't just fail, you would probably spectacularly fail. Meanwhile, major crimes are down. In most types of major crimes, they're down. Only in a couple of major crimes are they high or are they up. Tell that to the victims of the deceased. Tell that to the families of the victims, sorry. You know, tell the community that, so the two siblings that were killed, where the community wants to throw the book at the suspect who apparently, potentially, allegedly wanted to hide within the community, had some expectations of the community sheltering him. And thankfully, they weren't taken for fools. you're responsible. You have to pay the consequences of what you did. They want to see him pay those consequences because they're enraged. Go to that community and tell them, well, you know, we know murder is up, but major crimes are down. So we have the situation under control. This is us having the situation under control. When another person is killed in a health facility, this is us having the situation under control. Go tell his friends and family that major crimes are down. By the way, with regards to the other divisions, I forgot. Their murder numbers are decreased, right? What are they? One would think if you're making a claim like that, you should have the numbers in front of you. You gave us the numbers of divisions that were higher. So what about the numbers for divisions that were lower? Why did you not reveal that? And then major crimes are down. Back to major crimes. Okay, is smuggling down? Is smuggling reduced to what it has been for the last decade? Please tell me that smuggling is down. Drug sales are down. Extortion is down. These crimes, the complaints, and I think they're reasonable. Well, people need to report it for us to do anything about extortion. That's what Ashraf ASP Ali has said on this show, and I think it's reasonable. It's similar to domestic violence. If the police don't know about it, what do you expect them to do about it? How are they going to act? But you see, the key point of that is, if we don't report it, it's also not part of the statistics. How do you account for that? How do you account for the crimes that are not told to you because the citizens are too afraid of being killed if they speak to the police? Because unfortunately, all of the citizens who are afraid for their lives and don't want to talk did not get the memo that crime is not out of control. They missed that notice when it was published in the paper. So they are under the belief that their lives are at risk if they were to talk. I mean, even the government missed the memo that crime is under control because the AG didn't want to release the names of the lawyers who take government briefs. He didn't want to put them at risk. Don't mind, he needs to be accountable to the public for the expenditure of public funds, but it's dangerous out there. Maybe if he knew that crime was not out of control, he might have reconsidered his position based on his responsibility to the people and to the people's finances. And please, someone, after this press conference, apparently the National Security Council met under acting Prime Minister Stuart Young. So I assume he is also acting head of the National Security Council. Wanting to get, let me get the wording in the report. Immediate plans and initiatives to confront the violent and intrusive crimes and criminal activity taking place, according to the statement from the Office of the Prime Minister. That's what the meeting was for. He wants a briefing on the immediate plans. Well, I guess he didn't get the memo that crime is not out of control. Because if he knew that crime was under control, he wouldn't necessarily need to have a meeting tout suite to find out what the immediate plans are to deal with the situation of crime. Before it looks as though I'm bashing DCP Benjamin, I would like to point out, I find it very interesting that the commissioner has no longer appeared publicly. And now Mr. Benjamin is trotted out front to have to be the main spokesperson. Apparently, it's his area of responsibility, and the commissioner has told him that, you need to step up. it feels to me, I could be wrong, it feels to me, I suspect, dare I ask the question, is the commissioner hiding from the public because she doesn't know what to say herself? Because all the usual cliches are no longer acceptable, and dare I say they may not even understand why it's no longer acceptable. When people are being gunned down in daylight, I find it hard to believe that you have the overall situation under control. When the UN could lament about the sheer widespread availability of assault rifle type weapons in TNT and the influence of foreign organized crime and the escalating violence by the younger gang members, I find it hard. The UN has identified this. What part is it under control? When the Ministry of Education has to keep asking the police to help deal with school violence, what part is that normal, hence apt for the descriptor of being under control? When the United States releases a report, not just once, but at least twice in a row, that senior government officials and law enforcement officials may be involved in human trafficking. And again, do we know all the instances of human trafficking or just the ones that are reported? And if they stop reporting it, the statistics all of a sudden will look less. That doesn't mean that there's less human trafficking. Because, again, when senior people in government are involved, it's very difficult to convince witnesses to come forward. Now, maybe the American government doesn't know what they're talking about. I think what they had to say in their reports on human trafficking at least merits some consideration. And it implies that it is very difficult for me to believe you when you say that the situation is under control, except if we go from the perspective that there may be elements who want it so. It is under their control. And then if we look at it that way, then TTPS, executive. I could believe that. Please, go to all of the funerals of the victims from now on and let them know that their loved ones died to what could only be described as an unfortunate accident because it shouldn't have happened, because everything is under control. Maybe we really do need to make marijuana illegal again. I'll just say that. I'll leave that out there. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll open up the phone lines. Stay tuned. All right, just one ad and let's go. Now is the time when you take control of the show. We want to hear from you, the viewer. We have callers already waiting on the line, I think I'm still. No callers waiting? Okay. So we wait on you to call in, and you could have your say last chance for the week. I don't know if you want to agree or disagree with me. There are times like this, I will be honest, I don't necessarily want to pile on the TTPS. I don't want to be a negative Nancy. I don't want to be a critic. I don't want to, for the sake of being a critic, for the sake of being negative. it's just hard to listen to some of these things and to take it seriously and to feel as though our fears and concerns are being taken seriously. Phone lines open. Like I said, you could call and have your say. We have a caller on the line with us. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Hello.
Morning, morning.
Morning, Sean.
Morning.
40% of the dialogue time you have taken away from us, eh? But never mind. We on Benjamin. And I have one thing. And you are saying that you haven't seen the Senior Commissioner of Police. She cannot say face now, you know, because she says she's going to decrease homicide by about 5%. Now, your partner, Benjamin, DCP Benjamin, says it only increased by 7%. He has to understand 7% of 600 is 42 extra murders. And if we extrapolate it, it's going to be 649 and 2 legs. Sorry to be so facetious. But he has no credibility and he's not reading the newspaper. The police service has low integrity now, and confidence in the leadership is zero. And the Police Service Commission, we have heard nothing about them. They, together with the hierarchy of the government, have given us that leadership. And if we reflect back on the judgment yesterday, the affidavits that the senior police officer was in khaki, you know what the judge say? Unlikely and improbable that that affidavit relates to the actual occasion that they arrested the man. So what he's saying, I ain't too bright, I ain't going to do no paper. He's lying. He's saying a senior officer in khaki. And that is exactly what Benjamin is trying to do with us. He's trying to take us for fools, and he's waffled, and he doesn't give me, and I suspect a lot of people, the confidence that the police know what they are doing. The police is not responding to anything, and they are hoping, and every time there is 2 or 3 multiple murders, national security have a meeting, and nothing comes out of it. For example, you know what he's saying? The 5 or the 7 murders. You say, okay, they apprehended somebody with the siblings. But that was a East one. Any blind man could have hold the person because everybody thought it was a heinous kind and they identified the thing. So there was no police work there. But other serious thing I'm going to talk about is the education system. That St. Joseph on one of the major newscasting, that is a sin committed by our current government. St. Joseph, that college in Mount Hope or something like 95% finished. And you didn't do nothing, and you allow it for Gregan to sleep in it now. If that is not bad mind, spite, preventing the future of our children from school, I don't know what is. And there is another issue with one of the better performing government secondary, Couva East Secondary. They had no current yesterday, and apparently they don't have no current today. And the ministry refused to send the children home. And you know, yesterday was the hottest day in the year. Imagine you're in a school with no fan or anything. The children already faced with the dilemma of Rowan Sinanan and the potholes in the road and the traffic. And I want to add to the government that they should start looking at North Korea and use the Kim Jong protocol. When public servants are failing, you execute them. You know, if all the floods that caused recently in North Korea, Kim Jong executed 30 of his public servants. I don't know if the minister for that was executed too. So I don't want to go, but take a page out of what we want out of public servants. We want them to serve the people, serve the people, serve the people. I'm smiling, you know. I think we need that, too much of them failing us. Education, national security, Rohan Sedanan, oh gosh, are gone. And even water. I hear the whole of Santa Cruz on water this morning. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Caller, okay, so first thing I'll say, maybe we should look to Singapore and not North Korea. All right? Some people might take what you said about North Korea and they'll run with it a little too far and they'll kind of miss the point you were trying to make. That's why I said maybe we should go with Singapore instead of North Korea. Now, I'll just say this, the St. Joseph Secondary School, is that going to be like what was supposed to be the headquarters of Pan Trinbago on the highway? That was there for like 20 years? Or 17 years? Or I don't know how. It was there, it was wasting away for too long, like 17 years ago. So I don't even know how long that project has been left rotting to the elements. We have St. James on the line. Good morning, caller, on here.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
2 points. First point is that the caller raised again the question of the school in St. Joseph. But that is not the first time that this has occurred. I recall the school that the UNC built when they were in government, that this current government refused to open the school. One of the statements made by Colin Booth is that only Duen will go there. Second point is that we haven't, since the newly appointed Minister of National Security walked to Tobago, we haven't seen him addressing, this question of what is the state of the nation concerning the police service and crime fighting. Bye.
Thank you, caller. Is that it? I mean, Mr. Scotland was there. Minister Scotland was there at the meeting of the national security meeting. But yes, we haven't heard from him. Like at some point, the government needs to understand that when things are not defensible, indefensible, you can't just trot out some halfway. It's something I would prefer to say, but can't say it on air. Halfway defense, half-hearted defense, and expect the public to accept it because you've been feeding that to us for years, decades, I don't know. The people aren't stupid. They're just tolerant. Maybe too tolerant, but they're not stupid. Woodbrook on the line, good morning, caller, you're on the air. Caller, good morning.
Yeah, hello.
Morning.
Morning.
You're
go
on
ahead.
Yes, you're on the air, caller. Go ahead. Don't listen to the TV.
Okay, go ahead, yes.
Just talk to me on...
What I would like to say is that our murder rate after yesterday was approaching 440. The population of Toronto is 2,832,718. Right?
Mm-hmm.
As of now, Toronto has 52 murders for the year. The population of the whole of Ontario, the whole province of Ontario, is over 15.9 million. They had 252 murders for the whole of 2023. And Mr. Benjamin is going to come on the TV and see that rubbish, that they have it under control. Just do a comparison. Just do a comparison with those figures I give you and Trinidad and Tobago. And tell me if we have everything under control.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for that. What more is to be said there? Larger population centers have less murders than we do. The per capita figure, we are up there in the rankings. I always say that we have succeeded on the international stage, but we are excelling in something that we don't want to excel at. Petty Valley on the line. Good morning, caller, you on the air?
Yes, hello.
Morning.
Hi. I saw where Augustine from Tobago was saying that if we descended from what? The colonial masters, we're not supposed to talk about the free ships on the coat of arms or whatever the story is. Trouble is, my father is descended from the slaves. He's a black man. My mother descended from the colonial masters. She's born with blue eyes. So I have a problem. Am I allowed to talk about the free ship?
I couldn't tell you, caller. I am in a similar situation. Thank you, caller. It's yeah, and that is where I don't know to what extent we've imported those sentiments, because you get that a lot abroad, and I don't think it serves any practical discussion abroad at all. However, to be fair, I do think the opponents to that sort of speech, they're not necessarily careful, because you cannot take something which is damaging and then callously try to counter it and expect to have good results. And sometimes that's what happens. I find things abroad are too political, ideologically speaking, but to be fair, it's too political, and we've charged it with race. And this is just one more thing. And we need to remember that there are a lot of people in TNT who are in the middle, like the caller, and like, well, I'm even more in the middle or on the outside, but members of my family. We have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller. San Juan. Morning, caller. You're on here.
Mr. Small, good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Keaton. Although I ain't seen him. Mr. Small, listen to something, eh?
Yeah.
Remember when this bail for murder started?
Uh-huh.
From then to now, you look at the figures. Are these children who didn't want to study their lessons in school and want to hold an AR-15, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a 9mm, and a this and a that. You see this nonsense here? We need penalties, stiff penalties. You shoot in public, you're 15 years surety. And then you get charged for the firearm and the ammunition. The two major races on my land here, I could say that with no fear of favor. My land here, the two major races needs to be blamed. The disrespecting the goodly lady who is in charge of the police service. Nobody or everybody who's speaking never put on a boots or uniform and work in the police service. The police not supposed to be telling the population in this little dot nothing about their plans, nothing. Don't feel the position inside Parliament, don't know what's happening, you know. They know fully well the plans, and they have more plans planned. And it's coming from in the judiciary and outside in all the ministries of this government. They're not doing the ministers and the prime minister nothing. The poor people they're suffering. UNC voters, don't make a mistake this year, you know. Because you're seeing that northern range from Cedras coming down the road. Watch that northern range carefully. Don't let the bush from the northern range come down on the flat, you know. Because we get nothing from nothing on this land here. The government has no money to all them schools where Kamala leave that Manning put up. They're rotting. Eh? Billions of dollars going to waste. You build 100 schools. What madness is that? You don't build 100 schools in this little dot here. You build 2 and you open it. You all have a nice day.
Thank you, caller. Well, caller, I'll have to disagree with you with regards to the Commissioner of Police. I'm not a chef. Now, I do know somewhat how to cook, but I would imagine even people who don't know how to cook will know when the food is burnt. They don't necessarily are always the best critics of what is good food, but if it's burnt, if it's that bad, and I would hazard, I guess, that it is that bad. With regards to consequences, that point that you brought up, caller, I think we are underestimating how complicated it is, because we literally do not have the capacity in the justice system to deal with everything. And a very callous person will say that's why we need to execute them so that we don't have to actually put them up anywhere. If we don't have space for them, why bother with that? Just, execute them legally, right? That's a very callous thing to say. The whole system is in a mess, out of balance. I don't know if it's fixable anytime soon. Clarkson, be on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Caller? Check the other line. Just got a call on me. Caller. Okay. Well, you could call back. the situation with consequence. Okay, we have the caller back. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Morning, Sean. Morning.
Yeah.
All these Coast Guard boats we have back there. Any working in the coast, the border, any of these boats working?
Caller, they got the goats. They get the goats, caller. They don't get the cocaine, they get the goats.
No, I'm talking about the boats, the Coast Guard boats and the security forces that patrol the borders.
Or the Coast Guard didn't use their boats to get the goats? The pirogue?
Because in these South American countries, if you know who are going to release all the criminals to our countries, you know.
Basically.
All them criminals come into the country and doing what they want. Look in Texas, they have some Venezuelans going to take over the certain scheme, house and scheme, and it's the law in America. It's like America. They're doing nothing about it. Check so war in the country, let me say a couple of years from now, when all these criminals come into our country, what becomes of us? Our border is not secure. If you go down to the Cactus Point and see what's going on there. Look at boat come from the outside and shoot up them people. You don't know what they're in. There are a lot of things going on in this country, and nobody is seen about it. No authority. They just talking. It's just like a workshop. You know, let's not about a good program. You know, just calling in between now.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you very much.
You made a good point, and you reminded me of a good point. That situation in Venezuela. Let's say it for what it is. You can't try to arrest all of the opposition leaders and bar them from the courts and charge them with criminal conduct. Like at some point, if it was that apparent, we ourselves will be able to see it, but we can't. Venezuela is not stable, right? The situation is worse than when Chavez was in charge because Maduro is doing less for the poor people who have now realized, at the very least, Chavez used essentially that sort of welfare politics to get the poor on his side. He did a lot for the poor. They supported him. He had his base. It doesn't seem as though Maduro has that or is doing that. The situation is continuing to devolve. And as it does, we experience some of the consequences due to our proximity. America will also get its influx of immigrants. But the key point is, when situations collapse, when society collapse, and people start to turn to less than ethical means to survive, it encourages more criminal behavior. It's not that all of them are criminals, but more of them than the norm. The ratio of criminals per capita, for lack of a better way to put it, will increase because of the harsh conditions they find themselves in. And then, when they perceive they need to move on to somewhere else, some of them will end up here. Also, the instability, the unrest, makes Venezuela vulnerable for international organized crime to find distribution networks, bases of operations, criminal opportunities in Venezuela, around Venezuela. It is a blind spot on law enforcement in the region that has exposed all of its neighbors to further vulnerability. So that's what we have to contend with. There is a cost to wanting to play nice with Maduro and not at the very least trying to put things in place to deal with the ease of coming across the border, because yes, there will be legitimate migrants and legitimate refugees. But if they could come over easily through illegal means, it means the criminal elements, whether they're from Venezuela or passing through Venezuela, could also easily come through. And I think that is one of the main driving forces of why the violence, the level of violence has escalated. It's not the only one. It's not the only one. Can't say that with certainty that it's the only one, but I think it's a major contributing factor. That's what's changed more than almost anything else, at least that I have observed so far between now and say 10 years ago. So what are we going to do about it? Caller had it right. They don't have no ideas. I'm sorry. I know the other caller thinks that they have ideas and plans. Yes, they should not reveal the details to us. But what I wanted them to explain is not the details of their plans, caller. It's not the details of their plans. There's more nuance with regards to public communication than that. And at the end of the day, the results shows that they do not have any idea on how to change the situation. Because yes, in theory, if we double our police force, triple our police force, quadruple our police force, we might be able to throw enough bodies at the problem that we could suppress it. But I'll give you a hint. That ain't happening. And even if we did that, the judiciary is not going to be big enough. The High Court is not going to be big enough. The prison service is not going to be big enough. We'll have to increase that too. You can't just find judges on the streets and say, go take murder cases. That's not going to work. All right. Thanks to all the callers, though. I appreciate your perspectives. I appreciate your comments. One of the reasons why I know the situation is not under control is because the voting public, with regards to their democracy, our democracy, have abandoned the reins of control of our society. And we need to pick it back up. If we don't, we should not expect change. It's up to all of us to exercise the responsibility of those that live in a democratic nation. Make today and this weekend a good one. As Mr. Shah would always say, remember your allegiance to the Republic. Stay safe out there. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital